and welcome to the Martini Shot. My name is Brandon, and today I'll be reviewing the 2023 thriller, Knock at the Cabin. But before I do that, let's usher in the end times with a cozy cabin cocktail I've named Cabin Fever. And hey, if you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to help support the channel. There's no denying we live in crazy times. Sometimes it's best to just get away from it all, go off-grid, and piss off to a world free of the pains and rules of the modern world. But if you're bad at starting a fire like me, sometimes you gotta settle for an Airbnb cabin in the woods. And if the apocalypse decides to knock up on your door, well, you can hunker down with this cozy, woodsy cocktail. I chose ingredients that would be warming and comforting, perfect for watching the world fall apart from your secluded log cabin. Let's get into it. All right, let's go ahead and start with our base spirit that is going to be some bourbon whiskey, and you're gonna be doing 2 ounces. All right, let's go ahead and sweeten this up a bit with 1 ounce of maple syrup. And now for some tartness, courtesy of ½ ounce of lemon juice. And then finally, we're gonna add some bitters. I'm going with orange bitters, but I think you can also use Angostura. I think that would pair pretty well alongside all the other ingredients. And you're gonna do 2 dashes. All right, let's get ice in our shaker and shake to chill. Grab yourself a rocks glass. Now add your ice. I recommend a big old whiskey cube, and go ahead and strain. Next, we are going to be topping this off with a little bit of sparkling apple cider. And finally, to top it off, we are going to be garnishing this with a orange peel, but we're going to do something a little bit different. So there's this technique where you take a orange peel and how you would usually express the oils from the skin on top of the drink. Well, we're going to do that, but we're also going to be putting a lit match in front of that. It's going to give this really nice smoky orange scent and flavor that's going to be on top of the drink. It's really going to elevate the drink to something special. And then you can take that orange peel, discard it, throw it in the drink, rim it a little bit, whatever you want to do. There you go, now you have a cabin fever. So the big thing that just kind of screams out to me with this drink is fall. You have all these kind of fall ingredients. You have the apple cider. You have the whiskey, which always reminds me of the fall and the winter. It all really comes together in this nice, cozy concoction. Everything really works alongside each other. The orange from the bitters and from that flamed peel really go a long way to pair with that apple cider. So you do have a little bit of fruit in there, but then you also kind of have something a little bit more grainy with the bourbon, and then the maple syrup kind of adds that nice little bit of sweetness to it. And you also get a little bit of bitterness on the tail end of each sip. And like I said, that flamed orange peel really goes a long way. You might not think it, but if you're able to do it correctly, it definitely changes the complexion of the drink, not only from a taste standpoint, but also how you're smelling it each time you put it up to your lips. Now that we have our drink, let's jump straight into the review of Knock at the Cabin. Oh, M. Night Shyamalan, what a enigma you are. A director of many styles and stories that has given us truly trend-setting films that define genres, and some of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. Now, while I wouldn't exactly call myself a fan of his work, I can't help but respect him for being someone who still manages to find success through self-funding his own projects and constantly trying new ideas to surprise viewers. He's a man with what I assume is a genuine love for movies who never looks to offend anyone. It's just a shame this mindset doesn't always translate into good movies. A Knock at the Cabin is the director's latest foray into thriller territory, aiming for a contained, character-driven story about making an impossible decision to save the world. But does it succeed at being emotional, tense, and maybe a little thought-provoking? Let's talk about it. What was meant to be a quiet, relaxing cabin getaway for a young girl named Wen and her dads Eric and Andrew is quickly turned into a nightmare by the arrival of 4 people armed with makeshift weapons. The group explains they have experienced a shared vision of the impending apocalypse, and the only way to stop it is for one of the now captive family members to choose to sacrifice one of themselves. The family obviously doesn't believe them, but as natural disasters begin to roll in across the world, it becomes clear that the fate of the world may be decided inside this small cabin. So the concept is fairly simple, and the film is rather contained, mostly taking place all in one room. And that's okay, plenty of directors have made this kind of setup work. Shyamalan actually has at least one decent example of this I can think of, but let's be honest, he's not really known for very high quality writing. He seems to be much more of a concept writer rather than a dialogue writer, and that was one of the biggest detractors for me here. Which is a shame because there are some decent performances here that sometimes manages to succeed beyond the writing. Dave Bautista continues to impress with roles that allow him to go against type and really flex his chops as an actor. Despite his character Leonard having the appearance of a hulking brute, he's soft-spoken, well-mannered, and is incredibly patient despite the world being on the line. He's certainly the standout, but most of the other actors do a pretty decent job at expressing terror and emotion. Some of the performances just get shot in the knee by some pretty bad dialogue, which can severely dampen the seriousness of the film's conflict. The writing also lacks a certain poeticism to give the story enough depth to make it more than a surface-level apocalyptic film, but more on that later. I also couldn't help but notice a lot of the plot holes here, like cable lines being cut leads to phones not working, but the television is still fine. Also, the Doomsday Group sacrificing themselves one by one to unleash a plague on the world didn't make a ton of sense. I feel like if you wanted to stop the apocalypse, maybe don't do the thing that makes everything progressively worse. The story itself is surprisingly straightforward for a director known as a purveyor of out-there concepts and surprise twists. That's not always an issue, but here it makes the story far too predictable and generic. It's not presented in a way that feels genuinely mysterious or tense because the film doesn't give enough to convince you that either option, the apocalypse being real or fake, is plausible. It becomes strikingly obvious what the film is trying to do, and for some, it may be enough. It really hinges on the impact of a would you rather question. Would you sacrifice someone you love to save the lives of everyone on Earth? The conflict is really between Eric and Andrew, two gay men who have faced years of bigotry and hate from the world, and whether or not their sacrifice is worth saving a world that hates them. The emotional energy behind their aversion to accepting this decision is compelling in a sense, but where this conflict leads them ultimately falls flat, and honestly, it's a little too safe. The most apparent example of this is in the ending, which I can't really articulate without getting into spoiler territory, so if you want to avoid spoilers, click to this timestamp to get to the rest of the spoiler-free review. Still here? Let's let the spoilers run free then. So I didn't know about this until after I saw the movie, but this is based on a book, The Cabin at the End of the World. While most of the film sounds like a pretty faithful recreation, there are some pretty significant changes. For example, Wen dies after being accidentally shot with Andrew's gun. Ballsy stuff. In the movie, that doesn't happen, and Wen ends up leaving the cabin with Andrew after Eric decides to sacrifice himself, effectively stopping the apocalypse. But in the book, Eric and Andrew are the last ones left and are given one last opportunity to sacrifice one of themselves to save the world, but they refuse, opting to take on whatever is left in the world together. A pretty bleak and kind of depressing ending, but there's a reason for this. Andrew and Eric's identity as a gay couple is a huge theme in both of the book and the film, but while the film mostly uses this as a way to differentiate the two dads' views on their predicament, it's even more impactful in the book's ending. With Wen and their captors now dead, Eric and Andrew are left alone to make that sacrificial choice, but they refuse. The refusal is reflective of attitudes towards gay people in the modern day, where they are constantly told to stop what they're doing and try to hide it as best as they can. Refusing to sacrifice one another is also a refusal to give in to the wants of the loud majority without concrete evidence the world is actually ending. At the same time, the Doomsday Group does their best to be kind and patient with them, but still push them because of what they believe is a calling from a higher power. Sound familiar? This makes you question if a command from a higher power like that can possibly be morally good if it's centered around an immoral act. This is all completely missing from the film, and I think it suffers for it, making the film much more shallow and one note. I get this probably wouldn't have appealed to the common audience member, but a discussion could have been sparked. And really, there's nothing deeper to talk about with this film. The film isn't offensively bad or unwatchable because of these changes, but it does let me down a little bit. While the performances, visuals, and even the pacing are pretty competent at times, the overall narrative and execution is far too weak to let those aforementioned elements be as good as they could be. The emotional moments are undercut by bad writing and a narrative with little mystery or ambiguity, which really holds back the final product. As a simple apocalyptic film, it's only fine, but I'd like to think Shyamalan is capable of more than just fine, despite how often he tries to convince me otherwise. For my rating, I'm giving this film 2 grasshoppers out of 5. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Martini Shot. If you saw a knock at the cabin, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. And if you like what you saw here and would like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me across all social media accounts. Those links are down in the description below. And if you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to check out my website, martinishot.blog. Until next time, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember to drink responsibly.